The last few years really have been a bit of a mixed bag for James Bond fans. Despite No Time to Die becoming the fourth highest grossing film of 2021, it ended on a bit of a downbeat note, with James Bond dying. I still haven't gotten over that, even though it's been, 3 years now since the film came out? Since then, a lot of questions have been asked. What's next for the James Bond series? Will it continue in this current social climate that we live in? Who's going to be the next Bond? Will it continue where No Time to Die left off, or will it just be another separate timeline thing? Well, since No Time to Die came out, we haven't heard much. Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson said the next Bond is going to be a complete reinvention, but filming was at least 2 years away. In the midst of all of this, Amazon decided to buy MGM, the studio which owns the back catalogue to the Bond films, for $8.45 billion. And then they got to work on a TV series, which wasn't so much a TV series as it was a reality TV series, which I don't consider proper television because it's just a bunch of people wandering about doing stuff in the hope that it'll get them some short-term attention. Then, late last year, we heard news that there was some creative disagreements going on between Amazon and the Broccoli family. Apparently, Amazon wanted to expand the James Bond series with spin off TV shows and spin off character stories, to which Barbara Broccoli said, "Did you read the bloody contract when you signed the deal to acquire MGM in the first place? Were you not listening to that, or were you just too busy snorting coke up your nose?" Then, last month, in February 2025, news broke that Amazon and the Broccoli family had come to a stalemate. Amazon is now gaining creative control of the James Bond film series, with the Broccoli family remaining co-owners of the franchise. Now, as a James Bond fan, I was pissed off when I heard this news because, frankly, I don't like the idea of an American corporation, especially Amazon, one which doesn't really seem to care about what its audiences want, hence the fact that we have absolute crap like The Rings of Power and The Wheel of Time on Prime Video, gaining control of probably one of the most British series of all time, second to only Doctor Who, I guess. And from the response from James Bond fans, they seem to agree. Oh no, Amazon's taking control of this franchise. What does this mean for James Bond? Is Bond going to be female? Is he going to be black? Is he going to be in a wheelchair? I mean, he could be all three at this point. I mean, it would help with the ESG scores for Amazon, wouldn't it? Now, I did a video about this entire matter a while back, and if you haven't seen it yet, then maybe go and watch it. It's somewhat informative, if a little ranty in places. But now, news has broken about Amazon's plans for the future of the franchise. And I'm not just talking about Jeff Bezos listening to the fans and posting on Twitter, "Oh, who do you think should be the next James Bond?" No, Amazon has once again proposed the idea of expanding the James Bond franchise with a female 007 spin-off series. Industry magazine The Hollywood Reporter revealed sources close to the franchise say the streamer approached the Broccolis with pitches for a TV series based on Moneypenny, the MI6 secretary who's been batting eyes at Bond since Sean Connery's days, as well as a show about Bond's CIA buddy Felix Leiter, and maybe even something involving a female 007. Now, I'm not going to pretend I speak on behalf of all James Bond fans. Of course I'm not. That would be wrong of me. But, who's asking for this? Who has asked, oh yes, what the James Bond series really needs in order to stay relevant is a spin-off TV series focusing on Miss Moneypenny? It's the same story with the Felix Leiter show. Yes, Leiter and Moneypenny are beloved by Bond fans, but are they beloved enough to justify a series? This is kind of like what Marvel has done in recent years. Look at all the TV shows they've brought out. Moon Knight, Miss Marvel, She-Hulk, Agatha All Along, Echo. How many people do you think know who these characters are? I mean, sure, they may have come across once or twice in the comics they read when they were a bit younger, but were they that popular enough to warrant a series of their own? With Amazon now holding the keys to the Bond universe, an adaptation of author Kate Westbrook's The Moneypenny Diaries, which explores Miss Moneypenny's life before working with Bond, is reportedly the frontrunner, with actress Florence Pugh lined up for the starring role. Look, I'm not interested, okay? I am not interested in this, okay? James Bond is a series which focuses on films, all right? Films that are big events that occur once every few years or something. You introduce TV series to that, you dilute the overall quality and excitement that comes every time a new James Bond film releases. Again, look at Marvel and Star Wars. Marvel was pretty much limited to making films for the MCU up until 2019. Yes, there were television series on the side, but they were produced by another division under Marvel Television, and they didn't really connect that much to the MCU films. They were kind of set in its own adjacent little area of the MCU. So it didn't really matter that much if, they kept producing 18 episodes per season or whatever, because the stories being told under Marvel Studios in the MCU and the stories being told under Marvel Television in the MCU, they were separate. So it didn't really matter that much if you chose to focus on one or the other, because they were separate. They didn't kind of overlap, and they didn't require much homework in order to understand what was going on. Now, though, since Marvel Studios television series are more interconnected with the films, the overall quality of Marvel projects that has come out has kind of gone down a bit, because it's every few weeks now that we get a new Marvel TV show or a movie. And that reduces the overall excitement and quality and rarity of a Marvel project. And it's the same with Star Wars. Star Wars was pretty much just limited to films with a couple of TV shows on the side that didn't really require that much continuity or homework in order to understand what was going on. Now, Star Wars is just limited to TV shows that come out every 6 months or so, and that's really reduced the event status of Star Wars as a brand. And it certainly doesn't help the TV shows that they've been making, like Marvel, are utter crap. Not that Amazon would care to understand what that means. According to THR, Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos wanted complete control of the Bond IP after hearing an off-color comment by long-term Bond producer Barbara Broccoli. That being that Amazon are complete fucking idiots. Digging deeper into the situation, Bezos read her quote in the Journal and got on the phone and said, "I don't care what it costs, get rid of her." Now, this to me is just incredibly petty of Jeff Bezos. When you take over control of a franchise, or partial control of a franchise that has maintained its individuality and its creative endeavors the way it has for 60 years, and then demand that the people who have been partly responsible for keeping it that way get the hell out and don't bother coming to meetings, it really doesn't paint you in a good light. More so, it just paints you as a bit of a bully and someone who wishes to have control for themselves, like a child trying to take all of the cakes and toys for themselves, rather than sharing it out with all the other kids, or allowing some kids to have their fair share. Thankfully, there are some high-profile individuals willing to call out Bezos for his bullshit. Timothy Dalton admitted that he was a bit disappointed by the decision that the franchise had taken, or rather, the decision that Amazon and the Broccoli family had come to. And now, Pierce Brosnan has thrown his hat into the ring. He has said that it is a given that the next James Bond should be British. In an interview with the Sunday Telegraph, the former Bond also said he thought it was the right decision for the franchise's long-standing producers to hand creative control over to Amazon. "It takes great courage for them to let go," said Brosnan, who is Irish. "I hope that Amazon handles the work and the character with dignity and imagination and respect." You're entitled to whatever opinion you would like about Brosnan as Bond. I mean, I personally think he was quite good in the role, although the quality of his films did start to go a bit downhill with The World Is Not Enough and Die Another Day. But I really think that what he's said here, it really resonates with someone as a British Bond fan. James Bond is a British character, all right? He may have parents who, his father was Scottish and his mother was Swiss, but he is still a British man by heart. And he should be portrayed as someone who is British in his attitude, in his demeanour, in his accent, how he behaves, someone who is quintessentially British. You try and make him an American, and you've just kind of got someone trying to do a slightly iffy impression of Tom Cruise or whatever kind of big action star that America has kind of championed as, the next Tom Cruise or whatever. The problem is that James Bond isn't really, your typical secret agent. He isn't someone who just walks in silently and gets the job done without raising, too much attention. He is a spy who, more often than not, gets himself involved in a bit of a tussle with bad guys, which results in, a lot of chaos, explosions, car chases, and collateral damage. And you get the impression that Amazon sees him as a bit problematic. I mean, he's a gambler, he's a womanizer, he used to smoke, he drinks quite a lot, he beats up bad guys, and, his attitudes can be a little bit outdated. And look, I'm not opposed to changing some of the more problematic elements about James Bond, such as, maybe his attitudes towards women and stuff, because, it's not the 1950s anymore, and I get that some attitudes do need to change so as not to elicit too much controversy. But when you start to change too much about what makes James Bond, James Bond, you're not writing about James Bond anymore. You're not portraying James Bond. You're portraying somebody else who is supposed to be James Bond, and it feels inauthentic. It feels fake. That's why I think Brosnan is right for saying that Bond should remain British, because he is a British character. Now, I'm going to move away from this entire matter. It's available to read on BBC News or The Telegraph if you have access to it, and move over to something that Hollywood Reporter published 2 days ago. It's called License to Shill Inside Amazon's 007 Takeover. It's the Bond movie's most shocking plot twist in decades. But will the tech giant's surprise buyout of the franchise prove deadly, or could it breathe new life into the cinema's most famous spy? Spoiler alert, it's probably going to be the former if Jeff Bezos decides to go with sod it, the Bond fans don't matter to us. They don't matter to us. They never have. The article starts off with something about a musical tribute to Bond that was made at the Oscars. I mean, don't bother going to watch it. It was terrible, and it was just a bit of an insult, really. Then it says, there was one small problem. Days before the ceremony, Broccoli and Wilson announced that they were selling Bond to Amazon. Yeah, not great timing, really. It was a bombshell development that caught much of Hollywood, including, clearly, Oscars musical producers by surprise. What could have compelled them to do it? Money, I think. And the fact that, Barbara Broccoli is in her 60s, Michael G. Wilson is in her 80s. They're both approaching retirement age. And honestly, the thought of, going to do battle with a man who has way more power and influence than the two of them could ever dream of just didn't seem that compelling to them anymore. More pointedly, what does the sale mean for Bond's future? Amazon, of course, had purchased MGM, Bond's longtime home, for $8.5 billion, mostly to get its hands on the 007 IP and build it into a Marvel-style universe filled with bingeable TV spin-offs. We've only had one in 3 years, that being 007 Road to a Million. I get the feeling that was just created as a way of saying to the Bond fans, look, we know you're desperate for something Bond-related. Here's this to tide you over. And when everybody was like, oh, no, this is just a reality show with, the James Bond logo plastered all over it, they just decided to renew it for a second season beforehand. I'm not going to be watching that show ever again. But now that they're out of the picture, Amazon can do whatever it wants. A TV show about Moneypenny? Why not? A prequel about Blofeld's teenage years? Sure. More 007 game shows? Please no. Well, at least the Hollywood Reporter understands how we feel. But anything is possible. Amazon is now free to milk the franchise dry. Yes, they are free to milk it dry. But like Spider-Man's Uncle Ben once said, with great power comes great responsibility. It's the same issue that Disney has with all their IPs. They're in control of, some of the most profitable IPs out there. Marvel, Star Wars, the Muppets. They could milk those franchises dry even after all the audiences have left, and that's what they're doing. But they don't understand that with control of some of the most influential and iconic characters in pop culture history, they have the responsibility to make sure that the stories being told respect the law and the canon that was already established before they bought the rights to those characters and the franchises in question. And when you hire the wrong creatives to tell those stories, it actively damages the overall value and reputation of the brand, which is why you clearly want someone in charge who can do a good job of, telling stories, crafting new stories, creating new characters that fit comfortably into those worlds. There's a bit here in the article about how the last few Bond films, particularly the ones with Daniel Craig, ended up making a lot of money, with Skyfall becoming the first Bond film to make over $1 billion, yada, 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 and how that factored into Amazon's decision to eventually buy MGM outright. Apparently they didn't buy it just for the Pink Panther. Of course they didn't. We just try to focus on making good pictures, and it takes time. It takes a couple of years, said Michael G. Wilson, shortly after MGM's sale to Amazon was announced. Putting all that energy into making 10 or 20 hours of a TV show, that's a big commitment. We'd have to delegate to do that, and we've been very reluctant to delegate. His half-sister expressed it even more bluntly in that interview. It's not something we've ever wanted to do. And I don't blame them for doing that, because, when you have spent the last 60 years primarily working on James Bond films, the idea of pivoting to television is risky and not something that is expected to be warmly received by all of your fans. So you stick with the films. It may be the safe path, but even so, it gives you a sense of familiarity. It allows you to continue making what you know and love, and do so in a way that can continue to innovate and expand on the series without, divulging off in different directions and moving into television or streaming spin-offs and whatever. Now, the article mentions that the departure of Michael G. Wilson from the franchise was partly the reason why Broccoli decided to walk away too. After 30 years of Bond movies, she no longer had the stomach or stamina for the endless studio battles or the years-long Bond production marathons, certainly not on her own. And there was no obvious successor, not even in Michael G. Wilson's son, Greg. Apparently, he wasn't considered ready to step into his father's shoes. I can understand that. I mean, if you were the son of somebody who had built one of the biggest media franchises of all time, particularly a media franchise that was primarily focused on films that came out once every few years, you feeling kind of, I don't know, unable to really take over, such a legacy is kind of understandable. I don't know if I'd be willing to do that if I was in Greg Wilson's position. Like, I don't know. Maybe he made the right call by saying, no, I just don't think I'd be capable of doing it. Amazon has a mixed record when it comes to franchises. It spent a reported $1 billion getting a Lord of the Rings series, The Rings of Power, onto its servers, only to end up with a show that nobody thought was worth $1 billion, not even Tolkien fans. It's no wonder then that news of Amazon's takeovers was greeted like a death notice by Bond fans, who plastered the internet with RIP 007 posts following the announcement. I mean, can you really blame them for doing that? However, there is an opportunity here, now that Broccoli and Wilson are gone, for the streamer to reinvent an icon that could, truth be told, stand a little reinventing. I mean, like, what is there about Bond that needs to be reinvented? He is a spy who works for the British government, he seduces women, he drives very fast cars, he often has gadgets to help him out, he battles villains that are larger than life, and he causes a lot of collateral damage, which will probably result in insurance companies having a field trip. More importantly, there's nobody at Amazon who understands James Bond the character the way Broccoli and Wilson do on a molecular level. People think they know James Bond because they know the iconography of the martini and the gun and the gadgets, but there is a very particular set of things that occur below the surface that have kept the character resonating for over 60 years. There's a line from the novel Goldfinger about how high tension was Bond's natural way of life and that pressure and danger relaxed him. Amazon is going to need to get people in the room who understand that. Now, that's by John Cork, who wrote the Bond Bible for Eon in the mid-90s when Broccoli and Wilson took over creative control of the series from Albert R. Broccoli. And he's got a point. If Amazon can't get the right people in the room to make a James Bond film, if they just give the job to somebody who doesn't particularly care about James Bond, who think he's problematic, and that it's just content to be chewed up by audiences who will digest it with little to no pushback and then be like, oh, when's the next piece of content coming out? Then, frankly, Amazon, you get what you deserve, all right? You have control of some of the most iconic franchises out there. You have James Bond. You have the rights to make a Lord of the Rings TV series. You spent $300 million on Citadel, which was, kind of their answer to what James Bond could be like if it was on the small screen. And I mean, the latter two haven't really fared all that well. So what hope is there for James Bond? I mean, the only way I can see this working is if they take the approach they did with Reacher and The Terminal List, both of which were, pretty good shows that actually stayed faithful to the source material. I know this may sound a little bit cliche, but sticking to what you know and keep delivering great Bond films, that will keep the audiences coming back in droves every time it appears on the big screen every few years or so, instead of, just expanding to television and not focusing on James Bond, but rather side characters, which, for all intents and purposes, they're not main characters. They are side characters. They are there to support Bond, not replace him. And I think if Amazon can't get that through their thick skulls, if they don't understand that they have control of an IP which deserves to be treated with respect and dignity, because it is not like most other IPs like Marvel and Star Wars, which, they expanded to television long before, the onslaught of absolute crap on Disney Plus, then Amazon is going to be completely screwed and the James Bond IP is going to be dead, all right? It'll probably just be thrown onto the scrap heap with other British icons that were once great but were ruined by executives hiring the wrong creatives, more specifically Doctor Who. And I think it's important to understand that the fans themselves are entitled to their own opinion, just like Pierce Brosnan is entitled to his own opinion. You may not like the fact that he believes Bond should still be British. You think it could go to someone who isn't British, and you're entitled to your opinion. But you have to understand that changing a character for the sake of, keeping in line with the times isn't something that can be guaranteed, constant success. Agendas change, even if the world stays the same. Like we're seeing it now with, the rollback of DEI and diversity and, preaching and virtue signaling. Like that may have worked a few years ago, but the backlash against it now, it's just proven that it's not a viable cause anymore, and not many people are willing to defend it. And if James Bond goes down this route, then nobody will be there to defend it. They will be like, well, we preferred the older films because they were escapism. That's what you want from a Bond film and from any film. You want to escape into a new world, away from the horrors of reality, not be preached by, actors or pretenders who claim to support causes that they claim are important to them, but in reality they couldn't give a toss about. And really, this is what I think James Bond needs to do: stay away from all this, modern day, current day slop, and just focus on making good, exciting films that people want to see. Listen to your audience, right? The fans and the audience are your paying customers, right? They are the ones who know best. They may not be able to agree on absolutely everything, but at the end of the day, if you continuously refuse to listen to fan feedback and claim that the fans are toxic, then when the time comes that your franchise is dead and you're trying to get it back off the ground, nobody will be there to care about it. Nobody will be there to champion your cause. They will have forgotten about that series and moved on and found something else which is much better. And frankly, they will not care. They will not shed any tears. They will just leave you to die, even if you believe that there is no time to die.